This is not a straightforward story of maternal advice. It is one of control manipulation and the quiet battles fought behind the sheen of real television. Janelle Brown, once the placid anchor of the sister wives' family, has finally opened her mouth, unveiling crevices in a veneer that many thought was impenetrable. In the eye of the hurricane is Robyn, the newest wife, whose parenting style has summoned silent, seething frustration from those who formerly shared a family with her. On screen, the story for years depicted harmony, unity, and equal responsibility. Cameras, of course, were always on, capturing celebratory milestones that seemed real. But in private, the script was different. Where the television narrated stories of multiple love, Janelle observed patterns of differential authority, care masquerading as transactions, and lessons learned not through empathy but accounts. Janelle's critique isn't personal. It is systemic. She recognizes a system wherein Robyn's kids are carefully sheltered, every caprice planned, every exchange watched, and every family tradition redirected deceptively. The atmosphere within that house, Janelle insists, is not only filled with laughter. There are thin lines of duty invisible to the naked eye, drawn by bank balances and meticulously crafted shared experiences. To appreciate the magnitude of this insight, one has to take a step back and view the dance of influence. Robyn, composed and polished in her speech, comes into a home filled with stories and history. But she does not blend into the narrative. Rather, she redesigns it in secret, coordinating things, expectations, and even holidays to suit her own blueprint. What has been inherited naturally over time, sweat, and effective labor by others, is taken over in secret, documented, and commodified. Janelle, from the eye of this developing system, sees a pattern. When kindness is taxed in dollars, compassion is taxed in degrees of convenience, and childhood is staged for appearance's sake and not for actuality, the family structure changes. The very concept of tradition gets subordinated to a balance sheet of control. So the tale starts not with revolt, but with watching. Janelle observes. She observes, and then she speaks. Robyn's mothering in Janelle's eyes is a deliberate balancing act of control disguised as concern. It is a place where the line between directing and dominating is not just fuzzy, it has been recast entirely. In public, Robyn smiles, teaches, and mentors. But the smiles, Janelle says, are calculated. They mean compliance, not attachment. Her carefulness, careful and calculated, is usually reserved for times when the camera is present or when her authority can be exercised without question. Janelle remembers scenes that on the surface seemed ordinary, a birthday party, a chore list, a school decision. But in both, there is a quiet, unrecognizable pattern. In choosing experiences for children, Robyn decides not based on what the child needs, but based on a pecking order of control. When there is disagreement, discussion is seldom the response. Boundaries are instead established, permissions offered and revoked, and consequences meted out with a near clinical accuracy. This, Janelle maintains, establishes an unseen architecture of dependence. Kids brought up under this arrangement find out early on that obedience is rewarded, curiosity, self-reliance, or disobedience is tracked. The very nature of childhood experimentation, trial, mistake, and genuine independence is silently lost. It is, as Janelle calls it, bank account parenting, an investment approach where love and possibility are dispensed as if they were capital assets, not emotional imperatives. Compare this to the older wives' strategies, where customs were shared, burdens were borne collectively, and love was demonstrated through proximity instead of arithmetic. For Janelle, this is the essential split. Where older generations fostered independence, Robyn dictates dependence. Where earlier mothers fostered resilience, she breeds conformity. The payoff is a home that runs smoothly on the outside, but under the gloss, relationships are characterized by power and control, not true family ties. Janelle's anger lies not in envy or competition. It lies in principle. She recognizes a world in which the natural cycles of parenting give way to the cycles of tactics. The children do not know immediately the impact, but eventually the insidious lessons of controlling care etch themselves upon their lives, molding for them what love, loyalty, and self are. Such is the beginning of Janelle's critique as a warning. It is not just about what Robyn does. It is about the precedent she sets, the emotional infrastructure she creates, and the legacy she leaves for the next generation. The sequence Janelle presents is not random. it is intentional. Robyn's influence works like a slow tide, moving the landscape of the family with an unseen force. Traditions, which were once shared and lovely, increasingly curved toward her domination. A Christmas tradition, a birthday custom. Even everyday small courtesies are quietly redefined, as if the very household were being rewritten according to her design. Janelle observes these changes with both incredulity and silent determination, recognizing that the smallest actions, who lays out the table, who determines which clothing is worn, which presents are bought, represent a much broader architecture of power. What is remarkable, Janelle notices, is how elusively invisible these acts of power seem. To the onlooker, everything looks perfectly normal. Robyn's interactions are courteous, friendly, even caring at times. But the impact is cumulative. Decisions that seem trivial in the instant make their way into influence over weeks, months, and years. The children, programmed to receive instruction as nurturing, seldom challenge the rules laid down. And if there are questions, the response is inevitably presented in terms of propriety, culture, or need, covering up the motive. This, Janelle suggests, is the discrete tyranny of so-called image-based parenting. In the domestic world of Robyn, appearances are paramount. Each smile, each gesture, each strategically composed moment fulfills two tasks: to legitimize her rule on the inside and present a picture of harmony on the outside. Genuine expression, unseemly, unscripted, and very human, gives way to a performance designed to please both the children and the narrative being constructed for consumption. Janelle compares this with the ethos she once thought existed: parenting based on shared responsibility and mutual respect. Decisions are negotiated, errors accepted, self-sufficiency fostered. Love here is not a commodity, obedience not a currency. Children develop not to please but to know and believe in themselves. Robyn, on the other hand, muddles up kindliness with calculation. Her provision is presented as caring but with strings attached, overt or covert. Permissions are issued and withdrawn with exactness, structuring behavior as well as satisfying needs. Janelle's words put one thing beyond doubt: this is not merely a matter of style, it is a foundational split in philosophy, a chasm between care and control that characterizes the modern family dynamic. And the effects, Janelle warns, are insidious but enduring. Children who grow up feeling commanded instead of loved, directed instead of empowered, might eventually ask not only what rules are put upon them, but what architecture of what family they really are having put upon them. The effects of Robyn's parenting reach far beyond routines and rituals. Janelle notices it in the manner the children navigate their lives: hesitant, calculated, and excessively deferential. Autonomy finds no place to grow. Judgments that should be natural, intuitive, or experimental become subject to a compliance filter. Everything they do, every decision, is measured, weighed, and nudged by an unarticulated set of rules. Janelle remembers one moment that hit her with the contrast. A straightforward question from one of the kids, to go to an event or express their opinion on a disagreement, was responded to not with discussion, but with scripted answer. Okay given, pending timing, looks, and perceived appropriateness. The subtext was clear. Autonomy is conditional, freedom is commodified, and even happiness is paid for. The antithesis of Janelle's own parenting couldn't be stronger, where she promotes initiative, debate, and the embracing of missteps as stepping stones for improvement. Robyn demands consistency, predictability, and conformity to her vision. The child becomes more spectator in their own life and less actor in a meticulously choreographed play. Even everyday gestures, a bedtime routine, a homework project, a sibling squabble, become negotiations with authority instead of natural growth. Janelle's anger is not about power for its own sake, it is about what it accomplishes. Children who grow up under this system learn early on that influence trumps honesty, control trumps curiosity, and approval is won through conformity, not merit. The very terms of interaction are organized around expectation and permission. Love is not gauged on the basis of presence or empathy, but on compliance with the rules of the home. And the subtler tragedy, writes Janelle, is that the children will never know what is lacking. They become used to the rhythms, assuming that structure equals care, and that authority is always equal to guidance. By the time one becomes aware, habits are ingrained, behaviors institutionalized, and autonomy cut short. This is the silent insurrection that Janelle believes cannot be overlooked. Not the boisterous, public confrontations, but the gradual depletion of choice, spontaneity, and independence. And it is this decay that has finally driven her to speak out, to raise attention to a parenting style that, while seemingly well-intentioned on the surface, covers the subtle accumulation of power. Janelle doesn't beat about the bush when explaining what she perceives as the outcome of Robyn's way of doing things. The house, though tidy and beautiful, is a set upon which appearance governs action. Kids enact compliance instead of exercising judgment. Smiles are usually quantified, and wonder is tamed by the unseen weight of expectation. The message they learn is unmistakable. Obedience is security, approval is safety, and love comes with strings attached. This is not a criticism of intent, Janelle explains. Robyn's behavior is intentional, calculated, and carefully put into action. She pours her energy into producing a home that operates in flawless fashion on the surface. Meals are meticulously planned, schedules tightly scheduled, and holidays apparently merry. But Janelle's observation shows the undertone. All the details are a deliberate addition to a larger story, where influence takes precedence over connection, and authority overshadows authenticity. Janelle remembers watching interactions in which kids, even teenaged ones, hesitate over making easy decisions. Simple choices, what to wear, when to talk, what to do, are approached as negotiations, and even slight resistance is corrected. The home is run as if every movement is open to scrutiny, analysis, and possible punishment. Love in this structure is then a prize to be earned, rather than something that is always available. It is here, Janelle observes, that the philosophical difference is starkly apparent. Her own parenting style permitted imperfection, spontaneity, and conversation. They were learning experiences, lessons in conflict, and individuality was encouraged instead of being stifled. In contrast, Robyn's system is more about predictability, alignment, and conformity. The children quickly learn that conformity is safer than expression, that their value lies in how closely they align with expectations placed upon them. Janelle stresses that this is not a question of style, it is a question of outcome. A child raised to negotiate love, approval, and attention might thrive in programmed settings, but court serious trouble when faced with autonomy, ambiguity, and moral nuance. The building blocks of resilience, initiative, and self-trust are undermined. And so, what seems to the superficial eye a well-oiled domestic machine is, to Janelle's gaze, a tightly organized system of conformity. It is a machine that creates outwardly conforming children, but inwardly guarded, tentative, and trained to respond to expectations before venturing out to discover who they are. Janelle's criticism is not limited to the children themselves, but to the manner in which the household allocates power and attention. Under Robyn's system, influence is concentrated, vested in a small number of highly scrutinized choices that cascade through all interaction. When it is a matter of family rituals, holidays, or even tiny celebrations, she puts a gentle but unmistakable control, dictating not only what occurs, but how it occurs, who is involved, and what it means. The older wives, Janelle notes, were based on a regime of shared power. Decisions were negotiated, contributions taken into account, and the burden of control shared over several viewpoints. Traditions developed organically, passed along and modified with affection and mutual consent. In contrast, Robyn's home is a calculus in which power is measured, achievements edited, and obedience rewarded. Each smile, each gesture, each exercise of care has an implication of expectation behind it. The impact, Janelle says, is additive. Children learn to decode the surroundings early on to gauge the response, and to adjust behavior to gain approval. Independence is not prohibited, but it is encouraged subtly. Confidence is made conditional. Spontaneity is modified by the unseen ledger of management. The fun of discovery, the liberty to err, and the safety of unlimited encouragement are substituted with an architecture of cautious management. Janelle describes encounters with the children that illustrate this dynamic. Even as they ask for desires or questions, they do so hesitantly, expecting judgment or correction. Their speech is edited, their movement calculated, and their smile frequently bears the shadow of calculation. It is a home where the distinction between guidance and domination has been lost beyond all understanding. And yet Janelle insists Robyn is not acting out of evil. She is calculating, intentional, and as far as she is concerned, caring. The criticism is not of motive, but of impact. By prioritizing order over autonomy, obedience over exploration, and calculation over spontaneous growth, she has reinvented family life as a system of economic efficiency, at the cost of leaving the inner lives of its members subtly imprisoned. The implication is momentous. A child can seem well adjusted to the outside world, smile for the cameras, obey rules, and join rituals. But at home, they might be learning to rank performance over genuineness, compliance over conscience, and calculation over curiosity. And this, Janelle says, is the insidious risk of a system based on influence instead of empathy. Janelle points out also the unspoken tension between Robyn and the veteran wives, a dynamic long worked around on camera. Off-camera interactions might seem friendly, even collaborative, but behind the scenes, Janelle portrays endless negotiation of influence, a silent battle of power over the organization of family life, decision making, and whose voices get heard. Robyn's strategy, she says, is methodical and calculated, where experience, intuition, and shared past serve the older wives. Robyn works by exact calculation. Each recommendation, each correction, each choreographed activity has the double function of directing the children and affirming her authority. Even good intentions, gifts, celebrations, or advice are couched in an unspoken assumption of compliance. In this regime, childering is less about the child becoming self-sufficient and more about staying in line with a meticulously constructed vision. Janelle remembers moments that make this evident. When a family holiday drew near, rituals once shared in common were quietly reordered. Tasks were assigned according to not skill or preference, but Robyn's participation plan, attention, and influence. Even small choices, who lays the table, who decides the menu, became markers of compliance, a microcosm of a larger hierarchy by which older wives and children, too, were having to adapt to unwritten rules. It is here, Janelle contends, that the danger is. Kids learn to perform for validation, finding out quickly that love and praise are conditional. Their lives are choreographed, their decisions supervised, and their autonomy subtly bounded. The absolute freedom of childhood, Janelle stresses, is supplanted by an architecture of controllable, guaranteed outcomes. But this architecture is given a cloak of normalcy, even affection. Robyn smiles, interacts, and cares, presenting the illusion of love and concern to the naked eye. All appears to be in order, warm, and balanced. But Janelle's observation breaks the pattern. Appearance is meticulously managed, and control is subtly concentrated. Children do not even consciously realize the subtle lessons being taught. Instead, they just learn to align their wants and choices with expectations they cannot define. Janelle couches her criticism not as accusation but as observation. It is a warning about the consequences of parenting that prioritizes control over connection and structure over empathy. In Robyn's household, compliance is rewarded, questioning is discouraged, and the invisible architecture of influence shapes the inner lives of children in ways that may only become apparent years later. Janelle's observations extend to the emotional climate of the household. What to outsiders appears as happy interactions and effortless coordination is in fact an extremely managed system in which emotions are controlled and reactions carefully scripted. Happiness, annoyance, excitement, and even sorrow are screened through expectations and limits that Robyn imposes. Kids rapidly learn to look forward to not only results, but emotional repercussions. The result, Janelle describes, is the internalization of hierarchy subtly. Kids become proficient at reading for cues, responding to prevent disapproval, and attaining reinforcement by compliance over initiative. Their emotional development, she cautions, is less a matter of self-expression and more one of learning the rules in the home. They learn that love and attention are conditional upon compliance with expectations leveled against them. Janelle remembers moments when she attempted to offer alternative viewpoints. The child would ask for something, pose an inquiring question, or become frustrated, and she would provoke conversation, exploration, or even benign defiance. In Robyn's system, they were frequently redirected, corrected, or reframed into the larger agenda of control. It was, Janelle observes, a subtle lesson in control. the kid can talk, but the last word is the household orchestrator's. This dynamic is supported by unobtrusive signals that outsiders might not catch, the management of time, attention, and resources. In Robyn's home, these are not apportioned equally or instinctively, they are deliberately aimed at maintaining alignment and compliance. Children who conform to what is expected are rewarded with approval, privilege, and affirmation, but those who deviate from the predefined boundaries are subjected to gentle correction or withholding of reward. The longer such a system lasts, Janelle cautions, the more it becomes entrenched. Children learn not how to go out into the world on their own, but how to anticipate, predict, and please a well-maintained hierarchy. Autonomy gives way to obedience, curiosity to calculation, and exploration to alignment. Nevertheless, with all the subtlety of these lessons, their effects are evident in personality and conduct. Janelle points to the hesitation, the overcautious decision-making, and the deference to the judgment of others. These are not qualities that develop overnight. They take years to grow up in an environment where control is disguised as care. Janelle is most scathing about the manner in which Robyn's system affects family relationships. The dynamics of siblings, previously characterized by cooperation, negotiation, and shared experience, now exist under an unseen hierarchy. The older children automatically supervise the younger siblings, adopting behavior to the standards imposed by the household's orchestrator. Even peer relationships are subtly governed. Choices, talk, and movement are screened in terms of compliance. This, Janelle describes, is social conditioning. Children learn that authority, not cooperation, determines the outcome. Their natural empathy is diverted toward appeasement. Their innate interest in people, situations, and ideas is balanced by the norms built into the structure of the household. Play is choreographed, questions are quantified, and even conflict is bargained with restraint. Autonomy to naturally explore relationships is subtly restricted. Janelle points to one very illustrative instance. A small skirmish among siblings was de-escalated not by mediation or negotiation, but by prearranged procedures meant to exert control. Every step was led gently by Robyn, with results that prioritized conformity over comprehension. The kids obeyed, yes, but they learned the lesson as well. Conflict resolution is achieved through submission, not discussion. These lessons accumulate for Janelle from a child's point of view. Kids build an internal guide that associates obedience with love and acceptance. Personal judgment is no longer needed in decision-making, but alignment to authority is the standard. Emotional expression is measured, curiosity is probed, and autonomy is covertly dissuaded. It is this system that poses the greatest concern, she contends. The facade of a cheerful, functional home belies a hidden, more insidious lesson. In Robyn's system, influence supersedes individuality, control disguises caring, and conformity is the currency of love. To the naked eye, everything seems in order. But Janelle, who has grown up within the structure of the extended family, knows the psychological toll, the loss of autonomy, and the eventual outcomes that can surface years later. And it is an understanding, Janelle insists, that underlies her critique. She does not speak out of competition or ill will, but out of love for the children, for the family, and for the lessons that shape not only their current lives, but the adults they will someday be. Janelle also speaks to the power of perception. Within the home and in public perception, on television, Robyn exudes warmth, attentiveness, and calm. She interacts with the children, schedules perfectly, and projects an image of a controlling mother. To a stranger, she looks professional, caring, and considerate. But Janelle contends that the appearance hides the reality, parenting based on calculated control, not authentic empowerment. The gap between appearance and reality, Janelle finds, has implications not just for the children, but for the older wives as well. Their traditions, contributions, and history are usually eclipsed, reinterpreted, or incorporated into a new story with Robyn's authority at its center. It is a subtle taking over that goes far beyond parenting. It informs the story of the family itself. She remembers times when the children would absorb these lessons without even noticing. A reminder, a reprimand, a tactful deviation by Robyn might quietly redefine behavior, bringing it into conformity with unspoken expectations that were never discussed or negotiated. Compliance in this situation is a survival mechanism, and autonomy an extravagance. rather than a necessity. Janelle sets this aside when describing her own style, where errors are a positive learning experience. Feelings are untrammeled, and communication is the priority. The contrast is stark. One model builds confidence, autonomy, and genuine engagement. The other builds wariness, calculation, and compliance. It is a fine but deep fissure, one that Janelle cautions can determine the future course of the children, with regard to how they interact with authority, navigate relationships, and see their own agency. In addition to the children, Janelle points to the impact on family cohesion. A family where power is consolidated, traditions get remodeled, and obedience is punished more than creativity can inadvertently encourage tension, resentment, and passive resistance. Older children who are used to joint governance and give and take might identify the change, while younger ones learn it as the norm. This builds a layered dynamic compliance on the surface. Ambiguity below. At the end of the day, Janelle's criticism is not of Robyn's ability or love, of which there is plenty, so much as it is of the philosophy behind her parenting. It is a caution about the insidious amassing of power, the molding of reality over freedom, and the eventual effects of a paradigm in which compliance trumps deep connection. Janelle looks past the direct impact of Robyn's parenting. She observes a wider pattern, one that informs not just the children but the family itself. The power Robyn wields is indirect, calculated, and accumulative. It is manifest in the small moments, the timing of praise, attention, and daily routines. These apparently trivial decisions construct a family where obedience is a routine, autonomy is postponed, and genuine expression is moderated by the implicit codes of power. Janelle remembers seeing children move through this system, even those in their teens and 20s, many years past the time when autonomy should have been fostered. Act with restraint. Inquiry is tested, want filtered, and impulsive action weighed carefully against the potential repercussions. Kids don't revolt in a straight-out fashion. Instead, they accommodate, internalizing the belief that their conduct needs to be expected in order to gain attention and acclaim. It is, Janelle observes, a steady incremental molding of character by structure more than empathy. This is in stark relief to the family model Janelle herself subscribes to, one founded on conversation, respect for each other, and shared accountability. Parenting for her is about risk, fallibility, and experimentation. Mistakes are learning opportunities. Curiosity is fostered and autonomy encouraged rather than stifled. The children are drawn into a negotiated process, learning to negotiate, assert themselves, and trust their intuitions. In Robyn's home, on the other hand, the process is controlled, centralized, and quantified. Authority shapes outcomes, and the children's job is to adjust their alignment with the orchestrator's plans, instead of learning independent judgment. Janelle also points out the implicit messaging built into the system. Celebrations, duties, education, and even casual conversations hold beyond the immediate activity lessons. Kids learn that love and attention are conditional, that compliance is rewarded, and that deviation can attract disapproval. They are instructed to expect responses, calculate their options, and condition accordingly. Obedience is equated with love, obedience with care. In effect, the impact, Janelle cautions, endures. Children can become competent, courteous adults who look well adjusted on the surface. But beneath that fade, habits of deference, hesitancy, and dependency upon outside approval might be intact. Decision-making is through perceived expectation rather than personal choice. Confidence is gauged through compliance rather than initiative, and emotional expression is controlled through anticipation of the orchestrator's reaction. It is not a matter of style. It is a structural difference of philosophy. One style emphasizes empowerment and dialogue, the other entrenches control and foresees behavior. Janelle points out that getting to this difference is key to judging the long-term effects of Robyn's parenting. It doesn't matter if a home runs efficiently on the outside. What is important is the way kids are formed on the inside, how autonomy is fostered, and how trust in the self is established. In speaking out, Janelle is not placing blame but highlighting patterns. She is pointing to a system that, though orderly and attractive on the outside, subtly reworks emotional, relational, and psychological growth. The stakes, she contends, are deeper: the development of the children, the unity of the family, and the future of parenting itself. Janelle shifts her focus to the wider implications of Robyn's philosophy of parenting. It is not merely a question of rules, routines, or habits. It is about creating the moral and effective landscape of a home. Each decision, each move, each reproof conveys a message. Obedience is praised, initiative is put off, and authority is to be obeyed over one's own expression. These fine-grained lessons accumulate over time, building patterns that dictate relationships, self-conception, and choice long after the childhood years are gone. Janelle remembers witnessing firsthand the results. A child's small quarrel with a sibling would spiral not into conversation, but into a display of control. Permission was granted, but only under carefully bounded parameters. Carefree expression was redirected, subtly into compliance. Innate curiosity filtered through expectation. Even celebrations and holidays and small successes were presented as opportunities not to express love or individuality, but to shore up conformity and test obedience. The kid's behavior, she describes, is a product of the additive force of these lessons. They seem to be cooperative, courteous, and visibly happy-looking. But in reality, autonomy is discouraged, confidence is quantified, and self-expression is qualified by what is expected from those in authority. Where one would anticipate spontaneity, there is thoughtfulness. Where one would anticipate curiosity, there is tentativeness. Where one would anticipate freedom, there is a silent knowledge of limits. Janelle sets this against her own upbringing of children in a home constructed of conversation and equality of responsibility. Error is welcomed, independence fostered, and reliance on the child's own judgment. Emotional expression is prized, not stifled. Uniqueness is fostered, not shaped. Such a setting allows children not only to become competent, but also resilient, self-aware, and confident to operate in the world on their own. Robyn's style, Janelle asserts, is not of itself nefarious. There is attention, care, and effort placed in every movement, but the approach values control more than connection. The end product is a family in which appearances are slick, rituals are perfect, and conformity is present, but in which children's inner lives are quietly restricted, taught to expect approval instead of developing inner judgment. In simple choices, going to a party, wishing for something, debating a point, children learn to screen through expectations. They learn to ask permission, calibrate answers, and adjust behavior to fit standards instead of testing intuition. In effect, obedience is now the measure of love, and conformity takes the place of autonomy. Janelle makes it plain, the payoff of such parenting is deep. On the surface, the home may run like a well-oiled machine. Inside, children learn to defer, expect, and compute, instead of act with assurance, wonder, and integrity. Over time, they instill character, relationships, and self-image, leaving a mark that goes well beyond the formative years of childhood. She encourages viewers to see the difference between parent raising an independent child and parent claiming power. What can look ordered and under control on the surface can have underlying patterns that quietly influence the way children think, feel, and connect with others for the remainder of their lives. Janelle broadens her criticism to the longer-term repercussions for the family system. In a family controlled by Robyn's skillfully managed authority, relationships are transactional, defined by obedience instead of attachment. Siblings adapt to a system of hierarchy instead of haggling peer-to-peer relations. Kids learn quickly that affection is conditional and that being curious, disagreeing, or different poses subtle danger. By repetition, these lessons add up, influencing behavior patterns that carry forward into adulthood. Just the older wives, Janelle observes, are affected. Their customs, contribution, and histories are pulled in or reinterpreted to fit the orchestrator's version. Even the external interactions seem friendly. But the dynamic below is one of gradual power consolidation. Input is accepted but subtly steered. Pressure is applied softly but accurately. The outcome is a home where things appear to be harmonious, but the inside environment is one of control, calculation, and ordering. Janelle stresses that this is not malignancy, and it is not a criticism of attention or care. Robyn's parenting is diligent, systematic, and frequently well-meaning. But good intention does not disavow effect. Children who are raised in this system internalize obedience, alignment, and conditional love lessons. They may be exemplary on the outside, seem well-adjusted to outsiders, and be adept at working through systems, but the learned patterns of wariness, compliance, and deference last. The difference, Janelle says, is in philosophy. While one system encourages exploration, initiative, and trust in the self, the other produces predictability, alignment, and performance. Less is learned about independent decision-making than about expecting and gratifying authority. Emotional expression is calibrated. Curiosity is quantified. Autonomy is a conditional privilege, and not a natural right. Janelle illustrates with examples of the way key interventions serve this system. Disagreements that are minor, requests for permission, even everyday conversations are subtly directed in order to be in line with expectations. The children obey, yes, but also learn the lesson: authority determines behavior, and love is dependent on obedience. It is a subtle but insidious kind of influence, forming character, relationships, and self-image over the long run. Her criticism is not a criticism. It is an observation, a warning, and an analysis. She draws attention to the unspoken effects of a system that prefers image, control, and conformity to autonomy, conversation, and genuine relationship. The teachings of such a context are subtle but persistent, influencing the ways children interact with themselves, other children, and the larger world. In the end, Janelle presents her observations as an invitation to awareness. She invites examination of the difference between influence and empowerment, control and care, compliance and authentic engagement. The intention, she emphasizes, isn't to demonize but to enlighten, to illustrate the distinction between parenting for independence and parenting for order, authority, and performance. In wrapping up her observations, Janelle tackles the final question: what does it all portend for the family and for the children as they become adults? The habits Robyn has created are not automatically disastrous. She has made them subtle, interwoven into routines, expectations, and care gestures. But they gradually add up, forging identity, relationships, and self-image in ways that are not appreciated until decades down the line. Janelle notes that children growing up in this system typically thrive in choreographed environments, evidencing obedience, punctuality, and flexibility. Yet, the cost is internal. Autonomy is muted, initiative is filtered, and emotional expression is moderated by anticipation of judgment. Their natural instincts are constrained, curiosity tempered, and confidence calibrated to expectation rather than self-trust. What looks like harmony on the surface can conceal a quiet conditioning that shapes not just childhood, but the adult self. The older wives, Janelle notes, have long understood these dynamics. Their own lives and experiences as parents have taught them the difference between control and collaboration, management and encouragement, freedom and compliance. They have seen up close how authority impacts behavior, shapes perception, and creates family culture. And it is this lived experience that lends authority to Janelle's criticism. She writes from experience, from observation, and from the long perspective of family life under examination. Janelle insists that she is not condemning, but making us aware. Robyn's family home is well-run, tidy, and seems full of love, but it is orchestrated. Affection is doled out, influence is focused, and independence is conditional. And by understanding the distinction between structure and control, between guidance and consolidation of authority, families can weigh the implications of subtle parenting decisions. In her final essay, Janelle sets the broader lesson: parenting is not about order or appearances. It is about molding minds, cultivating independence, and developing emotional toughness. Obedience can produce a sheened facade, but autonomy, empathy, and trust create lasting character. Kids require freedom to experiment, to err, to ask questions, and to develop. Without it, even the most structured, watchful home runs the risk of raising adults who have been socialized to value conformity over authenticity, approval over criticism, and conformity over self-assurance. As the camera glides over the Brown residence, the distinction is clear. Traditions, routines, and holidays continue to be carefully controlled. But Janelle's words remain beneath the veil of order. There is a hidden orchestration of influence, a molding of behavior that is not seen but powerfully felt. Her message is unmistakable. Parenting is not about control. It is about guidance, trust, and empowerment. And in this process of reflection, the Brown story transcends reality television. it becomes a cautionary tale, an examination of influence, and a reminder of the precarious dance between authority and autonomy, compliance and freedom, control and genuine care. Ultimately, Janelle's point of view illuminates what it means to really raise a family, not through rules or image, but through empathy, conversation, and the creation of independent, resilient, and confident children.